Now we'll finish off Philippians today. Philippians chapter 4, which I've entitled Rejoice in the Lord Always, from that theme of rejoice, rejoice, rejoice. Now, in verse 1, Paul encourages his friends to stand firm in the Lord in this way. What is he referring to? He's referring to the previous chapter. There's a good chance this first verse should have been in the previous chapter. To stand firm amidst the persecution and suffering that is going to come their way. To stand firm against the enemies of the cross that he mentioned in chapter 3, verse 18. And then Paul closes his letter with quite a variety of closing comments. Quite a variety of last words. Firstly, Paul heard that his friends Euodia and Syntyche were not of the same mind. Yeah, let's take a shot at these names then. Euodia. Yeah. Yeah, it's close enough. And Syntyche. Euodia and Syntyche were not of the same mind anymore in Philippi, as Paul had remembered them being in the same mind. Not the same peaceful mind in the Lord at that point. They were not rejoicing together, working together in a partnership as they had been working together. Now, from a very literal reading of the Greek, which is how I understand this best. There's other ways of understanding this. There's ways of understanding this that people were not supporting Euodia and Syntyche because they were girls. I don't think that was the case. It appears more that Euodia and Syntyche were having a spat. And probably not a spat about Jesus or the gospel, or else Paul probably would have came down heavy with some more doctrinal nuggets with respect to what their disagreement was. Now I'm just speculating here. Perhaps it was just a spat about a guy. I'm just being a little funny here. But maybe it's just they're having a little rivalry about chasing the same guy. He's chasing some hot guy. And so, Clement. Paul says, Clem, he's asked to intervene. He wants Clem to look into what he can do for those girls. Now you would think the Purple Lydia, Sister Lydia, would be a better mediator between these girls, but for some reason Paul requested Clement to intervene. And Paul is basically saying to him, please take care of my little darlings, Clementine. Oh, my darling. Y'all know that one. Maybe you don't know that one. That's too hicky, is it? So that's a hillbilly. Okay. Okay, but Clementine, that's a silly nickname, the name of a fruit. So I suspect Clem had been nicknamed True Companion instead. We'll see in the Greek that there's this peculiar name of Zyzicus there, which means true companion. Is it a real name, or did Paul nickname Clement Zyzicus at this point? It's a possibility. Possibility that a lot of people are considering. Zyzicus. And Zysagus was delegated to be a true companion to those darlings now. Yep, Gus was to restore peace between them little darlings and to restore it gently, as mentioned in, you might remember, Galatians 6:1. Restore it gently. And to restore it gently with a gentleness that should be evident to all. Perhaps by gently marrying one of them, after all. Zysagus and Syntyche, they sound like a pretty good match to me. You all know that saying now? Zysagus and Syntyche sitting in a tree. Anyways, Paul repeatedly encourages peace among the brothers and sisters in this chapter. Not necessarily marriage, but peace at any rate. A peace that will be gained by thankful prayer and petition. Verse 6. A peace that will be gained by proper thoughts. Verse 8. But more so, a peace that will be gained by deliberate practice. Verse 9. And we'll see a little more on that in Colossians 3. However, there are some later manuscripts that fudge on that will word. The will word. Yet they fudge on the very certainty of the will word. And in that respect, that there's a manuscript or two that says that God, instead of saying that God will meet all your needs, it is fudged to read, God may meet all your needs. Is it will or is it may? Now the word that they are wrestling with there is the Greek word plerose. Is it plerose or plerosai? It's the only difference of one letter, an A or an E. And in all likelihood, it is the E, and it does mean will. Does mean God will take care of all your needs. Another reason not to believe that God may take care of all your needs is because that's pretty lame encouragement. I don't think Paul would write anything quite that lame. So, will. But will God meet all the needs of our bodies, or does he just care about our hearts and our minds? It says hearts and minds here in verse 7. Is that all that God is really concerned about here? Yet it shouldn't surprise you that some of those manuscripts say hearts and bodies instead. And one very, very early manuscript is surprising everybody by saying hearts and minds and bodies. Perhaps that manuscript was motivated by all the martyrdom that was going on, all the bodies that were being beat up. But that is surprising, and it bears consideration. But even if that is not the case, even if bodies was not in mind at this particular point, Paul still had it in mind, because he still suggests bodies over and over in the final half of this chapter, of how God provided for his bodily means, his bodily needs, through those recent gifts from the Philippians. And as a result, Paul is not hungry now, we see in verse 12. He is amply supplied, it says, and much to the Philippians' credit. And it seems, in my understanding, that this bodily supply is a last meal of sorts for Paul. It appears to be a final feast for Paul before he goes before Nero and loses his head. And is executed along with others in Caesar's household. And not surprisingly, the last words of Paul in this last letter, I realize it's hard to read here. Right at the bottom, it's a bad copy that you received, unfortunately. Maybe if you hold it up into the light or something, you can see this final word here just before the scratch out mark. Final word of Paul is, not surprisingly, Amen. Alpha. No, just on this bottom part right here. Believe it or not. 4 letters. Amen. And that's how Philippians is ended. With Amen. And in this particular manuscript, in something called Papyrus 46, something made up, written on papyrus, which includes Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. This is the only manuscript that has the word Amen. Wow, strange. Strange. Would this be Paul's final word? This letter? Final letter? Don't know. But it's something to consider. So, Paul gets his last word in, and it is Amen, which means so be it. Thus may it be. So be it. And now Paul is rejoicing in heaven, and we should be looking forward to rejoicing with him in heaven to Jesus for the glory of God the Father. Amen.